Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of X-Men the Animated Series Season 2, Episode 5, Repo Man. This originally came out November 20th, 1993. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you love everything X-Men. I'll be doing reviews of the animated series and the new X-Men 97. I also announce new products that are coming out related to X-Men and do giveaways, so make sure to hit that sub button. Now, this episode opens up with Wolverine, and he's in this Canadian wilderness, and he's screaming for a character named Heather, but he is actually greeted by Vindicator, who is part of the trap that was set up by Heather to get Wolverine through Alpha Flight. Now, Vindicator is the leader of Alpha Flight, this Canadian super team, and you already get bad vibes from him because he calls Wolverine Little Man. He's the first person you actually heard call him that in this series, messing with our short king here. And he's like, you deserted our team to work for Xavier, but you belong here. I've come to take you back. Now, that Team Alpha Flight we're going to see has North Star, Aurora, Sasquatch, Shaman, Puck, and Snowbird. It's cool that Snowbird just turns into a snow owl. I think that's sick. And at some point, she turns into what seems like a snow panther as well. And at one point, Wolverine gets away from them, hides in a tree. And Vindicator says, find him, hurry, the lab is expecting us. And then Wolverine says, lab, huh? No thanks, I've had my fill of labs. Now, this is where we get to the good stuff and we get to the flashback and to Wolverine Origins. So we see Logan is in this water tube in the Weapon X facility, and he is under Dr. Cornelius, who is doing this to him, but the one talking mostly is Professor Kenji. And he's like, start the adamantium feed. And his body is resisting the feed, so they ramp it up. And then once the process is done, the professor says, you should be proud, you are the first. Your skeleton has been infused with a rare metal called adamantium. Fascinating substance, virtually indestructible. Your bones should now be unbreakable. And he's like, in return, we hope to make use of your gift. So you're quickly getting, in a 20-minute kid show, a good idea exactly why this happened to Logan, who became Wolverine. And it's cool that they showed the important moment where his hands start to itch and the adamantium claws come out for the first time, which they did not expect that to happen. And Wolverine just destroys the lab, escapes, and it perfectly cuts to the present where he's like, no more labs. And then he throws up the X with the claws. That was great. Now, we get some huge cameos in this episode, and that happens when Jean is using Cerebro again to find Professor X. She sees really quickly Domino, then Nightcrawler, and it's the first time we see him in the show. Archangel, who we've seen before, but we see Cannonball. And then the first time we see Psylocke. And my favorite cameo this episode, Quicksilver and the one and only Scarlet Witch. Very cool. And Gambit has some great lines this episode. He's like, any sign of the old man share? I thought that was good. Now, back to what's happening with Wolverine. Shaman knocks Wolverine out of the tree. Of course, Wolverine, in response, proceeds to do a couple of cartwheels, which I thought was so funny. And Alpha Flight finally gets him down, and it's pretty cool how Shaman just lifts him with his powers. Now, Wolverine says to Vindicator, why are you doing this? And he's like, we don't want you, old friend, only the secret you keep inside of you, which is a little confusing because Vindicator will say different things this episode. He's so passionate about loyalty and being for the team, and that he's mad that he deserted them, and that here he's sounding more like he's actually for the General Chasen's cause. And what doesn't really line up though about that is that he says this out loud where the other members could hear this, where they say later in the episode they were only just getting Wolverine back to join the team again, not to actually do this experiment on what's inside of him. So that's where it got a little strange how they wrote that. Now, we see this character of Heather appears at the lab where they bring Wolverine, and she's like, I'm sorry, Wolverine, I had no choice. But Wolverine's like, there's always a choice. You're the one who taught me that. And we go back to the past here, and we see Wolverine ran into Heather and James where she tranquilized him and brought him back to their cabin. And she's like, we only want to help you. And we get this little montage of her trying to wrap his hands, and the claws still come out. And then she's reading him a book, and then he's giving her an admiring look. And he gets the yellow flannel from her. And then he literally says, you've helped me more than I can say, Heather. And this is where she says, and we have some friends who might be able to help you even more. You almost wish this didn't happen now. But that's where he's introduced to Department H, General Chasen, and Alpha Flight. Now, it's cool. This is where he got the yellow suit we see in the show. And James says, what do you say, Weapon X? And Wolverine's like, just two favors. Find out who did this to me and forget that Weapon X stuff. Just call me Wolverine. Love that line. Of course, he wouldn't want to be called that, as that project he was made to be. Now, in the present, Wolverine says to Heather, "You betrayed me, sister," which was great. And she's like, "I'm doing what I have to for the nation's security, for all of us." Now, this is where Chasen actually shows up in present day. And he's like, "Department H invested a lot in you before you went over the wall. Time we saw some return." So you see how Wolverine is just being treated like, Heather will literally say later on, an animal. He's treated like a product here. And we learn that Chasen has tried that same procedure they did with Wolverine with others and had no luck. So he wants to study how he survived the process. But Wolverine's like, "I survived it because I'm a mutant, you dimwit. Heal fast, remember?" This is a great line, but it also is a good line to get exposition out in a funnier way. And that it explains, yeah, like Wolverine wasn't born with these claws and this skeleton of adamantium. His mutant power is healing quickly, and that's what made that procedure possible and for him to survive it. Now, Heather just completely blew it here, because she's like, "I only agreed to do the testing if I was doing it, make it easy as possible as you," but she just trusted the wrong people. And you see James, who is Vindicator, is just spinning this back on Wolverine. He's like, "You abandoned us, duties, sacrifice, why did you leave?" And Wolvie's like, "It's none of your bleeding business." So that's also going to be interesting if you ever go into that, why exactly he left the Alpha Flight, but also probably because James is absolutely nuts. Now, what's strange, though, and this has been happening the past couple episodes, is we out of left field, especially in this episode where it's only 6 minutes left in the episode, we drop in with X and Magneto. And again, I'd prefer they just did a full episode with them at this point, and they run into Vertigo. And basically, the point of this scene is we learn from her that all the mutates in Savage Land are Magneto's creation. There's like that crash zoom on him where he's looking at Professor X like, "Oops." And then they get away from Vertigo and scene. So it just seems like they could have saved that and have a longer time spent with them in another episode. Now, during the probe of Wolverine, great line he has here. He's like, "Thanks for the light, kid. I could use a good tan." And then Jean feels Wolverine's pain and says, "Wolverine felt him, such pain." And Gambit has maybe his best line, says, "Man's been a pain since the get-go, Cher." I love that. Now, this is where Chasen says he wants to actually remove the skeleton at this point from Wolverine's body. And Heather's like, "You're nuts. No, he's not an animal." But this is where James shows his true colors. And he's like, "We saved you, gave you back your life. How could you leave us?" And Wolverine's like, "So I could be your weapon? Sorry, James." So really calls him out there. This is where Alpha Flight comes in to help, because they weren't told about this part happening to Wolverine. They thought he was just going to be brought back into the team. And I love Puck at one point just rolls into the robot security guard, knocks him out. I thought that was hysterical. And still, James tries to block Wolverine from leaving. He's like, "I won't let you leave, not again." And then he says, though, "Chasen was wrong, but you're still part of Alpha Flight." So now I guess he's not cool with the procedure, but he still wants him here. So he's flippy floppy here, James. And Wolverine throws him. He's like, "You should have let me go, Jimbo." So good. He's like about to kill him, and Heather's like, "No." And then I love when I talk about this show and the animation just freezes and doesn't move. And I love that James's face is just stuck on and doesn't move. And Heather's like, "You cared for me once. If you still do let my husband go, I still love him." Of course she loves this guy who's literally just exposed how awful of a person he is. And Wolverine is a great line. He's like, "This time for you, but if any of you come back for me for any reason, all bets are off." This was a great line to close the episode, and for me settled how strong this episode was. I love we got to spend so much time with Wolverine. He's a great character in the show. He's also very funny in his lines, but you really felt the tragedy of his situation, what happened to him in this episode in the past, and how he became the Wolverine we all know and love. And I thought they did a really good job, especially in 20 minutes, getting it through there, but also because I thought the past lined up really well with the present timeline with him in Alpha Flight. It really worked well as an episode altogether. My only gripes would be that strange line that James has when he says in front of Alpha Flight that he wants what's inside of Wolverine. It just doesn't line up with the rest of the episode. It's odd. They probably should just left that line out. And I also think that where they placed the Magneto and X moment was just so out of left field. Even better probably would have been just to put it as like a cliffhanger at the end of the episode. Honestly, best thing though, just not having in this episode. They've been dragging out the Professor X story with Magneto in little bits and pieces where they really should have just done a full episode of it. But I really thought this is one of my favorite episodes so far, and it shows you how good this show can actually be with the writing, especially in a 90s kid show. So really impressive. I'm giving this one a 9.1. Let me know what you thought of this episode down below. I love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment. I try to respond as many as I can. And please make sure to subscribe. I'm doing everything X-Men on this channel, and I can use all support I can get. And I'll see you next time.